speech, we saw on Libyan state television pictures of people demonstrating in favor of Gaddafi as a support for his belief that the protests were isolated and not necessarily representative of the country. And the problem that we have, clearly, is that there is so little media presence in the country, so little access for any of us to see what's going on. Is it possible that Gaddafi is reading this right, that he can get away with this?
I think that can't be ruled out. When people were ruling out Saddam Hussein in 1991, he showed that he came back and fought very brutally against his own people. And that can't be ruled out. But at the same time, there does seem to be growing momentum, not just in Benghazi, but in Tripoli. And that momentum will be very difficult to suppress.
Just very quickly, what of the broader reaction from the Arab League and the neighbouring states?
I think the Arab League has been muted by saying that it's suspending Libya. And I think if the death toll does mount, then the reactions will become more forceful.
All right, Anushka Kojian in London, thank you for talking to us. Now let's find out what's been happening online and what the social media sites have been saying in reaction to the events of the past few hours. Imran Khan has the details at the web desk. Imran.
Thanks, Taimur. Well, the web has lit up with reaction to the Libyan leader's speech. And as you can imagine, it's not just Libyans reacting, but people glued to their TV sets across the world. Now, I can't read many of the blogs out to you as the language is colourful, shall we say. But let's take a look at some of the ones that we can bring you from the microblogging site Twitter. Now, we don't change any of these messages. You see them as we do. Syrian Tammy wants some help from a famous psychiatrist. Freud, please come back to life and help us analyse Gaddafi's speech. No political expert can understand what he's saying. And one wonders what was going on inside Gaddafi's head when he reached for the constitution. Maybe if I read from a book, I'll look smarter than I really am. And this on his desire to die on Libyan soil. Gaddafi wants to be a martyr. Tell him to go outside so his wish can come true. And Change in Libya says this: the fact that Gaddafi's speech is extremely funny will only distract us from the truth. He meant every threat he made. And the reactions continue. Wow, threatening to shut off the water and blow up oil fields? What a great way to sway the public to your vision. And a common response to the man's word: I hate to be judgmental, but watching Gaddafi on TV confirms to me, in my view, that his eccentricity has become madness. Now, you can keep up to date with all of the latest, including reports from Al Jazeera correspondents all across the region and the world, and it's all on our website. Take a look for yourselves. That's aljazeera.net/English. There's also a live blog, a play-by-play of everything coming out of Libya, including some great opinion, analysis and reporting. So get involved on our website. So much of our reporting out of Libya has come from you. Stick with us for the latest.
Imran, thanks very much indeed. Now, in Europe, there have been more protests and condemnation over the Libyan crisis. Barbara Serra joins us now with more. Barbara.
Taimur, thank you. Well, the priority for many European countries now is how to plan the evacuation of their citizens from Libya. But there's also growing questions over the trade links that many share with Gaddafi's regime. Meanwhile, we're seeing an increasing number of protests across Europe. One of those protests is taking place outside the home of the British Prime Minister at Downing Street in central London. Al Jazeera's Tim Friend is there. Tim, what do the people gathered there want?
Well, they were demanding initially a no-fly zone over Libya. They're concerned that Colonel Gaddafi might use his own air force, or indeed has used his own aircraft, to attack the population. And so that was their first priority. Of course, they were also calling for Colonel Gaddafi to go as soon as possible. And while they were demonstrating all afternoon, several hundred of them here, very noisy and but peaceful demonstration, Colonel Gaddafi was making that speech saying he wasn't going to go at all. So there's a degree of frustration, but they still feel there's a turning point about to be reached where they think he will eventually be forced from office. And of course, amongst the crowd here, everyone has relations in Libya, so there were deep concerns about the safety of relatives. But as you were mentioning, also concern about the fact that, for instance, the British Prime Minister is currently on a Middle East tour, making speeches about democracy and the importance of the will of the people prevailing. but at the same time in his entourage are arms dealers who want to sell more weapons. And there's concern about the West still not really learning the lessons of the past when it comes to the Middle East.
Tim Friend with the latest there from Downing Street. Thank you very much. And that is it from Europe for now. Let's go back to Tamer in Doha.
Barbara, many thanks indeed. And let's close out this hour with a few last words from Ibrahim Sharqiya from the Brookings Doha Centre. So we've had mixed reaction from various parties around the world. No real consensus on what can be done. What do you think the best options are?
Thank you. This is, I think we covered enough the pressure approach. This situation will have, Muammar Gaddafi will have to see some pressure is exerted by international players, especially the European Union. But in addition to this, I would like to provide some insights, really, of what can be done, really, in addition to the pressure approach. There is Muammar Gaddafi. There are people that he trusts on the personal level. You know, some people like Shalcom. I'm glad that Shalcom spoke, and Shalcom is someone that Gaddafi trusts, and he can be influential.
He's the UN ambassador.
Yes, and there is Abdeslam Jalloud, also another personality that we haven't heard what he's doing these days and what can be done. That's another person that Muammar Gaddafi trusts, and Amr Moussa. Amr Moussa is someone that Gaddafi can work with Gaddafi. I think, again, with people that he trusts, we need to show that Gaddafi is to convince him that the situation is not the way that he sees it, really.
Are you surprised Amr Moussa hasn't said more? I mean, we had the Arab League meeting. Amr Moussa, within the Egyptian context, clearly one benefiting from the fact that a democratic uprising in the country is causing change. Do you expected him to say more?
I was expecting Amr Moussa to say a lot more than this. It's not really to only just stop the Libyan delegation from attending, because Amr Moussa in the past he managed different crises with Gaddafi, and he was very successful. He was very successful as a mediator in several crises in the past. So I was expecting Amr Moussa that he would fly to Tripoli and to sit with Gaddafi and to try to convince him that the situation is not really the way he sees it. One important element, one important thing that we can realize when we look at Gaddafi's speech, he emphasized a lot the role of the tribal leaders, you know, the tribes and his support. He still believes that the tribes support him. This is not the situation. And I think if he sees that the tribes, he's losing the support from the tribes, then there might be some impact is doing on the Gaddafi. The pressure only is not enough, it's not sufficient. Because let's remember that Gaddafi is a colonel, is a military person, and he is not easy to back off and to change his situation. So in addition to the pressure, one last thing is offer a place for him. Just one last thing is offer a place for him.
I'm sorry, we don't have time.
So
We're going to have to call it quits there. Ibrahim Sharqiya, thank you very much indeed. We'll be back with the headlines after the break.
Over the north of Beijing, as the visibility drops, you'll still see things